because I don't want to go backwards. I want to keep going forward. Together, that's exactly where we're going to go. God bless you.
I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
Welcome to a special edition of Rewind. It's special because we're going to spend quite a few minutes talking about how our history-making governor, Scott Walker, did as one of 10 Republican candidates for president at the first debate last night, Cleveland, Ohio. So we've asked a special guest, Brandon Scholz, lobbyist, leader of Wisconsin Grocers Trade Association, political strategist, and full disclosure, a member of the board of Wisconsin Eye. Brandon, you have a long, though, history as a Wisconsin Republican with a capital R. I mean, executive director of the state Republican Party, 87 to 91. Your Grocers Trade Association endorsed Governor Walker. So where do you stand now? Have you formally endorsed Walker?
I'm a homer, Steve, so I'm going to be on the governor's side on this one. The association hasn't, but eventually groups like ours will get around to that. But, you know, of course I'm going to support the governor.
You are?
Absolutely.
Okay. Have you started writing checks for one of his, how many, 3 campaigns? Yeah, 3 campaign committees, JR?
Super PAC, issue advocacy group, and then the governor himself. So.
Okay.
Lots of opportunities.
Yes.
Well, you have done a lot. You've done debate preps. You've worked now on issue elections and just your experience. So, overall, how'd the governor do last night?
I thought Governor Walker did great, and great because he did what he had to do. He didn't have to throw bombs. He didn't have to launch rockets. He didn't have to engage in fistfights. He needed to be on that stage, hold his own. I think he fortified some of his positions, and he gets out of there no harm done, and he continues on in the position as one of the top candidates that he's been at, and he moves on.
So, short version, didn't play to win, but played to be safe and not lose?
I think it's a little bit more than playing safe.
Okay.
Like I said, I think there are some things we'll talk about where he fortified his positions and he plays to some strengths. So he's there to win, but he's not there to have a fight like some of the others needed to do to get off that stage and claim credibility.
JR, you and I were talking. NPR scored him as in a 2-hour debate, having 5 minutes of 40 seconds. That was next to last. Bad thing for him?
Well, I got the impression from watching and looking at the reaction that Governor Walker was staying on message, which he's very good at. I mean, this is a guy who's made his record on, I stick to the point, you know. He was short, he was concise, they used the bell to ding you if you went over. He never once got the bell. You could argue he could have used more time to make more points. At times he seems a little bit like he's in a hurry to kind of get his concise points out, get out of there. But it looked like the long-term view for them of, it's August of the off year, we're not going to win this thing right now, but you can put yourself in a position to lose it by doing something stupid. Let's just get out of here, out making it, no harm, no foul. He kind of got, I don't say lost in the coverage, but he was not a focus of most stories. If you look at like Politico's 7 takeaways, it wasn't Scott Walker number 1, 2, 3, or 4, you know what I mean? Because he just made his points and got out of there, whereas you saw Rand Paul throwing bombs, Chris Christie going back at him, Jeb Bush looking like the same kind of approach to Scott Walker of, I'm going to get out of here unscathed, but not really pulling it off as well. So he just wasn't the focus, really, if you look at the overall picture of last night's debate.
Any PS before we listen to some of the clips, Brandon?
I think JR's right on the money. You don't have to get down and start fighting in that debate. It's a long campaign.
So he feels pretty good about how he did today?
I would suspect they do.
Okay. Well, let's listen to 5 clips from the actual debate. In the first one, and JR, we had talked, this is your nominee for the governor's best line when he talks about Hillary Clinton's emails.
It got the most attention of anything he said last night. It got the most attention on social media last night, by far.
Okay, let's listen to that clip.
Well, first off, per the cyber attack with Russia the other day, it's sad to think right now, but probably the Russian and Chinese government know more about Hillary Clinton's email server than do the members of the United States Congress. And that has put our national security at risk. If I'm president, he won't think about that. You know, Putin believes in the old Lenin adage that you probe with bayonets. When you find mush, you push. When you find steel, you stop. Under Obama and Clinton, we found a lot of mush over the last few years. We need to have a national security that puts steel in front of our enemies. I would send weapons to Ukraine. I would work with NATO to put forces on the eastern border of Poland and the Baltic nations. And I would reinstate and put in place back in the missile defense system that we had in Poland and in the Czech Republic. Governor, we would find steel.
Now, gentlemen, one thing that strikes me about this, is the specifics on foreign policy. weapons for the Ukraine, NATO force in eastern Poland, put the missile defense force back into Poland. Had he been perceived as being weak on foreign policy, and was this, if not a home run, a triple or a double, Brandon?
I think it was a home run, and I think this was one of the key points of the strategy of the campaign, was to fortify his position on foreign policy, to be in the right position, to show strength. I mean, how many times in that clip did he talk about strength, the position of strength? Bringing back Poland as, our ally. We used to be so strong with Poland. We've since backed off. So some of the early criticism of the governor was, okay, foreign policy isn't his expertise. I think he's shown that he's turned that around. I think he's shown that he can play on stage and talk foreign policy and take a strong Reagan-esque position that, this was the opportunity for him. I think he took it. I think he scored.
And that's your nominee as his best line?
Break it into 2 points. One, what Brandon's talking about, where he's sounding hawkish, if you will, about Russia, which is one of his big points.
Wants to put steel in front of our enemies. Excuse me, JR.
So you have him being hawkish because he wants to show that I'm a tough guy, I can take on Putin, even though, I'm a governor, I have no foreign policy experience. The other part is, a lot of what these clips you're going to hear are Walker's kind of typical stump speech lines. He's practiced quite a bit. Even that one about, he makes sure to announce, say mush and push the same way.
Yes.
Announce the you the same way. It's the same line you hear in his speech. So one issue for Walker is that he delivered his typical lines, but you kind of see in the reaction of, okay, at what point will this guy break past that and be able to think on his feet and pivot beyond just the talking points of Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton.
But isn't there irony here when he talks about Hillary Clinton's emails, when reporters like you have gone through thousands of his emails and aides?
That audience last night doesn't care about that.
Doesn't care about that at all.
The audience wants to see a guy like him be tough on foreign policy, to be tough on abortion, to be a true conservative who's going to stand out and be somebody stand up to Hillary Clinton. And that's what he's trying to do.
So he is short up in his foreign policy credentials.
I think this was a great opportunity for him to do that in front of a much larger crowd off the stump speech, smaller crowds and regional and places where he goes. This is a national stage, and he did it.
Okay, let's listen to the second clip. The question was, Governor, you announced that you would create 250,000 private sector jobs in your first 4 years. JR, you and I know the numbers, about 121,000. So here he talks about his record in Wisconsin. My question is, how effective is he in introducing himself to a national stage?
Well, the voters in Wisconsin elected me last year for the third time because they wanted someone who aimed high, not aimed low. Before I came in, the unemployment rate was over 8%. It's now down to 4.6%. We've more than made up for the jobs that were lost during the recession, and the rate in which people are working is almost 5 points higher than it is nationally. People like Hillary Clinton think you grow the economy by growing Washington. One report last year showed that 6 of the top 10 wealthiest counties in America were in or around Washington, D.C. I think most of us in America understand that people, not the government, creates jobs. And one of the best things we can do is get the government out of the way, repeal Obamacare, rein in all the out-of-control regulations, put in place an all-the-above energy policy, get people the education and skills that they need to succeed, and lower the tax rate and reform the tax code. That's what I'll do as president, just like I did in Wisconsin.
JR, you and I have opened dozens of emails from Democrats saying Wisconsin ranks 38th in job creation. So he forgot to mention that. I mean, so talk to me about how well he laid out his record.
It drove Democrats nuts in the election last year. Governor Walker got very, very good over the last year and a half of realizing that the 200,000 jobs pledge was a weakness for him and finding a way to muddy the water and pivot from that to what he wants to talk about. So yes, he's short of his jobs pledge. Yes, we're 35th, 38th, whatever we want to use for job creation. But he wants to talk about our unemployment rate dropping from over 8 to 4.6. He wants to talk about these other good things that help kind of muddy the water on the bad thing he failed to live up to. So that's that piece of it. And then two, again, pivot right away to Hillary Clinton. The line about the 6 richest counties, that's in his standard stump speech. Hillary Clinton wants to grow Washington, grow the economy, that's in his stump speech. It's a pivot every time from this to Hillary Clinton. That was his focus last night.
Brandon, the federal stats, I don't know if they're Census Bureau, they do say that Wisconsin is 38th in job creation. If he should he become the nominee, is that going to be a central argument of the Dems that he can't create jobs nationally?
Well, it certainly wasn't an effective argument in the recalls and in his re-election. I think what he demonstrates is I'm trying. I'm working. I'm pushing every button I can. I'm trying to get the government out of the way, and that's been part of the problem to bringing these jobs back. He hits a number on unemployment rates that people can understand. People outside Wisconsin
8% to 4%. Go ahead.
People out of Wisconsin aren't going to understand the 250, and now we're at 38th, 121,000 jobs. What they understand is unemployment rate and what that number is. And, you know, I think he has to deal with that number wherever it came from, whatever it was, but he has effectively done that, and I don't think you see a great deal of follow-up to that. Democrats have tried to pin that on him. They've tried to stamp it on his forehead. It has not stuck.
And remember that context too. Governor Walker has been governor almost entirely during a recovery from a recession. So of course unemployment has dropped, but he doesn't need to focus on that. He needs to focus on we're getting better. So should we be better than we are? Maybe, but he can focus on we're getting better, and that's the end of the story for him.
Okay, and the third clip, it's very short. I think it's only 8 or 9 seconds. The governor says, time out debate. Let's focus on Hillary Clinton, which I found very interesting. So let's listen to that.
Hold on. We're gonna move on. We'll come back to you, Governor Walker.
Just 1 second on this, though. We spend a lot of time talking about Hillary Clinton and pitting us back and forth. Let's be clear. We should be talking about Hillary Clinton on that last subject, because everywhere in the world that Hillary Clinton touched is more messed up today than before she and the
We have many questions to come. Many questions.
Was that pretty effective, Brandon?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, we talked about what was the strategy here for Walker to get out, no harm done, look at the long term, but everything has gone back to Hillary Clinton. That's who he's focusing on. He's not in the you know, bumping around with the other 9 in the debate. Clearly, he's drawing the contrast with him and Hillary Clinton.
What's interesting a little bit is the post-debate spin from his campaign has been to remind people we were focused on Hillary. Because if you look at the coverage, he got washed out a little bit because he wasn't mixing it up with people.
Right.
That was the one time you saw Scott Walker be the alpha male in the room of interjecting and trying to demand the microphone, if you will. But to them, it was kind of like, okay, look, people didn't pick up that we're focused on Hillary, not on Jeb and Mark and everybody else. So they had to remind people of this is what we were trying to do and accomplish. I think that was a goal from minute one, was Hillary Clinton.
Remember also what's in his stump speech. He's a winner. He gets things done. Bold, you know, he goes after it. He's a winner. I mean, you hear that. So you take that and people start to think he's a winner, and he's talking about Hillary Clinton. He can take her on. He's not afraid of it. He's not afraid of her. And so he's matched up to Hillary Clinton. He doesn't care about the rest of them.
This is the only time in the debate where he said, time out, let's come back to Hillary Clinton. As you said, Brandon, he didn't engage some of those personal back and forths like Trump got into, Christie and Paul. Is he afraid of those personal exchanges? Does he not do them well? Or is it not going to help him in any way, shape, or form?
Those exchanges help him. It's zero. They're a downer. They distract from his message. They distract from where he wants to be next week and a month from now, 6 months and a year from now. To engage any one of those doesn't get him there. So why bother? Why bother? This is him and Hillary Clinton in the general election.
You've just laid out a philosophy of campaigning for president that's kind of the little engine that could. Chugga, 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 chugga.
Well, go back and look at Walker's poll numbers in all these national Republican polls, individual states. Of all 17, whatever we have now in these polls, he has the best positive or favorable, unfavorable rating. If Walker attacks, he risks driving up the unfavorables. Remember, at a 17-person field, at some point it begins to winnow. As people fall away, who they look for. If you can keep that positive up, Scott Walker could attract that attention. Like we've talked before, he may not be number 1 in the polls right now, but as more people fall away, if he can get one-on-one with Jeb Bush, you know, assuming that the Donald Trump boomlet goes away at some point, that helps Scott Walker in some ways.
Okay, the next segment I want to talk about is Megyn Kelly's question about Black Lives Matter and policing in America. So let's listen to that, please.
Well, I think the most important thing we can do when it comes to policing is something you've had a guest on who's a friend of mine, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, who's talked to me many times about this in the past. It's about training. It's about making sure that law enforcement professionals, not only on the way in to their positions, but all the way through their time, have the proper training, particularly when it comes to use of force, and that we protect and stand up and support those men and women who are doing their jobs in law enforcement. And for the very few that don't, that there are consequences to show that we treat everyone the same here in America.
My question about this is he didn't tie his answer to the issue of Black Lives Matter. Now, you and I, we've all heard the politicians that step in it. I mean, was it Martin O'Malley who said, you know, all lives matter, and then he was shouted off the stage? but he didn't get into the racial issue here. Why not, Brandon? Is that not a win issue? Because African-American policing, and they feel they're targeting, that happens in Wisconsin.
10 people on the stage with, you know, a minute before the bell dings to take on the emotional side of that question, I think is too much. I don't think anybody could get through that question to the way that you know, why didn't he go to that route? I thought what he talked about and bringing in Clark, plug for law enforcement, message to bad guys, you're going to go down.
Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty strong position.
Well, but he said, we treat everyone the same here in America. Yeah, and I like apple pie and cold beer, too. I mean, there's just not a lot in there. JR,
well, remember, the audience that Scott Walker is speaking to is not the audience that's protesting in Ferguson, Missouri. The audience he's speaking to is the one that has signs in their window saying, Blue Lives Matter. So there was no upside for him, if you will, to go in and to criticize police. There's also not a number, I mean, the answer is not going to help Republicans next fall tap into minority communities, but it keeps him in a safe spot with the primary right now, and that's probably what he's trying to do.
Well, I mentioned David Clark. He didn't say he's an African-American. He said he's the
There's that audience there that knows, I mean, the people there know Sheriff Clark from his appearances on Fox News. It kind of is a familiar face. I mean, he's not well known outside Milwaukee County in Wisconsin, but he's a regular on the Fox News network, so maybe he's a little bit of a sign of, I got an ally, if you will, in law enforcement in David Clark.
And it probably speaks to a role that Clark may or may not have going forward.
When he decides what's next for him on his political career. Okay, the final, obviously, let's close with the governor's 30-second closing statement, and let's talk about that, please.
I'm a guy with a wife and 2 kids and a Harley. One article called me aggressively normal. I ran for governor because I was worried about my kids' future. Then I took on the big government union bosses, and we won. They tried to recall me, and we won. They targeted us again, and we won. We balanced the budget, cut taxes, and turned our state around with big, bold reforms. It wasn't too late for Wisconsin, and it's not too late for America. That's why I asked for your vote.
Okay, obviously, I got the feeling he's worked on that line. It wasn't too late for Wisconsin. It's not too late.
He's used it before.
Well, is it pretty effective?
It's good. I mean, he's trying to portray himself as the average guy. We saw that from his financial disclosure this week. He has a credit card debt, student loans. He is not a wealthy person. He's just like you and me, although I would kill my wife if she had a credit card with $10,000 on it, 27% interest rate. But he's a normal person, and that was kind of the point. I'm also a winner. I'm not like these millionaires out here. I've won. I've taken the fights. What's his line all the time? I've taken on big battles, and I've won.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, all of his comments throughout the debate were about winning, about taking on, about big and bold. And I think one of the reasons why he is where he is that, you know, the book is Unintimidated, right? And so he's not afraid to take them on, but the next book is Underestimated. And I don't think they looked at him and said, this guy's going to get in the race and he's going to end up number 1, 2, or 3 in some of these polls. He's going to lead in Iowa and he's going to be up on that stage not having to engage in brick throwing and instead take a position of strength. I think there will be some out of that debate that at some point have to go, what do we do about Walker? And it's not just the Bush campaign. I mean, the others are going to have to figure out who can they knock off here. They're all going to go after Trump. Do they pick at Walker? Because, you know, the last 5 or so on that list, you know, time is coming.
Those will be winnowed out.
Sure.
So when he looks the Americans in the eye and say, I have a wife, 2 kids, and a Harley, this is, number one, I'm one of you, and then go back to this theme. Some people pick fights, I win them. Yeah. This litany of I won in 2010, I beat the big government forces, they tried to recall me and we won again. So this is, I'm one of you, take me seriously?
Absolutely. I'm one of you, I am here. And you know, I will take you there. It's not take me seriously. I think he's already at that, I'm serious and you know it.
Well, it'll be fascinating for Walker going forward is if you look back at his career, at least the state stage and now the national stage, he has not had to debate somebody and tear into him. He was in a good environment in 2010 and was playing pretty much not to lose against Tom Barrett. 2012, the same thing. He focused on not Barrett, but on his accomplishments. With Mary Burke, it was the same thing. He's not yet had to engage somebody and fight him mano a mano and go after somebody. What happens when that gets down to March of next year and there are 4 people on that stage and Scott Walker's in 2nd or 3rd place? What does he do then? That'll be fascinating to watch with him. Another thing from last night that'll be interesting is even Megyn Kelly in the kind of the post-mortem, if you will, talked about the question she asked him on abortion. You oppose abortion in all cases, including the life of the mother.
Yes.
Would you really have a mother die rather than let out of abortion?
Right.
Walker did not really answer that piece of the question. Turned to, I'm pro-life in all cases. There are better options. Even she made the point of that could be a question that, you know, was kind of surprising to her, his answer. And then somebody else in the panel said that could be an issue for the general election, which it would. If he's the nominee, that's a tailor-made ad for moderate suburban housewives to see and go, I'm not sure about this guy. Okay. So those are things to watch kind of going forward with him.
Well, okay, let's talk about going forward. If he came out of this debate in a solid way, I'm curious, Brandon, which of the 10 candidates most helped themselves and which maybe didn't help themselves overall? Step back from just Walker.
I don't think anybody really had a punch-out of this debate. I think John Kasich probably got a little bit of a bump, hometown guy, but he was Kasich, and I thought that was good. I thought Trump was, you know, uninspiring and did nothing to help himself. But I think the bottom five we wrote down: Christie, Carson, Huckabee, Paul Cruz. Those five have got to do something going forward because, you know, they're out there. And with the, you know, the cocktail hour debate with Carly Fiorina just doing great, and there's this groundswell about how she's just fantastic. And if you watched it, if you watched her clips and her comments, she was tough. And she is, you know, everybody's saying she's got to be in the next debate, and I suspect she will because she did do well. She did punch out of the box as opposed to, you know, what else we had here. I don't think Governor Bush came off as, you know, we talked about, yeah, he's in for the long haul too. There was something about him being uncomfortable, and Rand Paul just kind of fizzled.
Talk to me, though, about the Trump phenomena. David Brooks calls this the politics of ego. Any chance he's going to be the nominee of your party?
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
So how does he exit? And he refused to take the I won't run third independent?
It's a great question because I can't see an exit strategy that makes sense with his ego. The two don't get in the same room. But at some point, he has to be on the ballot. He has to have a ground game. He has to go beyond, you know, what's on the nightly news. And if that doesn't start to happen, he's not going to punch his ticket, as Rick Wiley said. What does Governor Walker have to do? He has to win, place, or show in some of these states so they could punch their ticket to go to the next state.
Okay.
Where does, you know, if Trump doesn't punch that next ticket and all he's getting is media coverage, that doesn't work. There was no substance in this debate for Trump. So then at some point, who are the people that like Donald Trump? They're probably the low-informed voter. They're probably the people who think people in politics are stupid, and you know, and they hate them. But at some point, are those the people that are going to vote and play in the primary? Maybe they will. Maybe all of a sudden we'll have a greater turnout in Republican primaries than we've ever had. But I don't know that's necessarily the case.
Well, I think, JR, there's no doubt that you guys reported it. The Walker campaign is going to spend $7 million in Iowa ads.
Unintimidated, yes.
Unintimidated, yes. That's one of his three campaigns.
Super PAC, yep.
Yeah, Super PAC. But Rick Wiley, at that forum that WisPolitics hosted, said we don't have to win Iowa. Do they have to win Iowa, Brandon?
No, I think Rick was pretty pointed. So we have to win, place, or show. Obviously, they want to win Iowa. They want to come out, but you've seen candidates in past presidential elections that won Iowa and fizzled fast. They need to come out strong. They need to have a great ground game. They need to do well. Winning is great. And they need to get to the next place, the next place, the next place, because that's when candidates start to fall off. If you don't have the horsepower to get to state number 2, to get to New Hampshire, to get to North Carolina, to get to the rest of the states, all of a sudden you know, there's no supply behind you. You're just dead in the water. And I think that's their longer game. They're better prepared to go beyond the first phase and be ready for phase 2.
And do you look for some of these other 7 candidates who didn't make the major debate, who had their own, what did Graham call it, their happy hour debate? Do you expect some of those 7 to drop off pretty quickly, sir?
I think they have to, because it's a function of money, it's a function of support. You know, it was 16 people. How many can you cover? You know, you're going to look at the top 2 or 3. You know, this was an amazing debate, by the way. With 10 people on stage, you have to give them credit for having a well-controlled debate. To have that many positions from that many candidates out there, without having the bell going off and they have it be crazy and they're shouting at each other. But at some point, some of those folks just aren't going to make the cut. And so you start with the cocktail debate, and yeah, there probably a lot of those start to fall off. They're just not going to come to them. Fiorina, I think, is the exception. In the major debate, one or two of them are going to have to start to fall off.
Understand. Okay.
Remember this about Walker in Iowa. Iowa was about expectations. Bill Clinton, 1992, he finished, what, third? And it was a comeback for him, all right?
Santorum won Iowa. Go ahead.
So if Scott Walker goes into the last week of that caucus and he is the number one in the polls, or two, and finishes third or fourth, then he's got maybe an issue. Because New Hampshire is where you're seeing all the moderates place all the eggs in the basket. Christie, Kasich on the line. You don't expect him to do as well in New Hampshire. Then you have Nevada and South Carolina. If he doesn't build momentum out of Iowa and then New Hampshire doesn't go very well, that's where you can see a problem for Scott Walker. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that would be the not good scenario for Scott Walker. So winning, though, winning takes you through New Hampshire with a breeze. Okay, yeah, I finished fourth in New Hampshire. Hey, I won Iowa. Right. That's where my base is. Now I go to South Carolina, where I've got more of the same kind of voter, evangelical conservatives, than I do in New Hampshire with the open primary system. So that would be the one thing to watch.
South Carolina is the firewall.
Yeah.
And if you know, if you know, it's the old Lee Atwater thing. I mean, that's where they saved Bush, because they knew they couldn't get New Hampshire. They had the firewall built in South Carolina, and that was it.
Okay. Okay, enough of the political analysis. JR, you were the first Capitol reporter to report another major development this week. There was a federal court filing in which, let me quote from the filing, which you unearthed. I submit that there is probable cause to believe that Scott Walker, John Hiller, and Andrew Jensen in concert together committed a felony, i.e. misconduct in public office. That was an application for a Milwaukee County search warrant in 2011, made public this week. What's the context?
Well, let's break this into several parts, okay? First off, John Doe #1 was the one that touched Milwaukee County then Milwaukee County Walker and his aides at the time, all right?
Yep.
Shut down 2013, charges and convictions of 6 people, aides and associates of Scott Walker. That one is done, but the people who are targets of Doe 1 are now fighting back, saying, look, Doe 2 was blown in the water by the state Supreme Court. It's our turn now. They are not happy with John Chisholm. They want to get revenge. Cindy Archer, former top Walker aide, filed a lawsuit alleging basically they went after her because she helped with Act 10, the collective bargaining changes.
She's alleging a violation of her First Amendment rights, her civil rights.
But this is kind of like having a bounce back effect, if you will, for Walker, because if you look at the footnote of the first filing from Friday from a couple investigators, the judge who oversaw John Doe signed an order July 10th to allow these guys to use sealed records from the John Doe to defend themselves.
Okay.
What you find out from Friday was, oh, Cindy Archer was under investigation before they even knew that she was part of the Act 10 discussion.
Right.
She's under investigation for the leasing a lease in a building for the Department of Aging for Milwaukee County. Oh, by the way, here's the other details about Scott Walker. This office obstructed the investigation. Now you have this filing from Chisholm saying, basically his defense, but the interesting stuff was the application for search warrant, where you found this quote. Now the interesting thing about this, so that's part one, Scott Walker said all along, I'm not a target. I was never a target. Anybody says I'm a target, it's all liberal scare tactics. This refutes that point. Now, I had one source of Walker tell me that he'd never seen this document before we reported it, which is entirely possible. I mean, these records were sealed. And remember, too, Walker was never charged in this. So it means one of three things. Either A, the prosecutors thought he committed a felony but couldn't prove it. B, they looked at what they had and said, it's not a big enough charge to go after a sitting governor. Or C, he did nothing wrong, and they couldn't prove anything in court.
Right.
So there's that. But it's another bad headline for Scott Walker out of the Doe. And, you know, the Doe was never really a threat to him. I talked to you about, like, being criminally charged. Doe 1 went away. Doe 2 was such a mess with, like, the court cases. The danger for Scott Walker is the drip of headlines. Now go back to that order that Neil Dennisheim signed July 10th, allowing these things to be used. What's next? That becomes a question. Remember, Scott Walker had to sit down with the prosecutors in this case. We didn't understand the transcript of that. Might we see what Scott Walker said or what he was asked about in the meeting with the district attorney's office?
And it's important to note that this investigation focused on Scott Walker when he was Milwaukee County executive, not governor, not running for president.
Yeah.
So this is a 2011 search warrant app involving activities when he was Milwaukee County executive.
Here's the interesting thing. If you're a Democrat, there's a way to use this against Scott Walker. If you're a Republican, you get kind of a dicey territory. Again, going back to what I said about Walker's positives in these polls, if you attack, you drop your negatives. If you are, let's just pick Jeb Bush for the heck of it. If Jeb Bush says Scott Walker's a threat to me, I need one of my allies to go after him on this, you run the risk, if you're Jeb Bush, of it bouncing back on you and it hurting your bid because Republicans go, wait a second, you're picking on one of ours. So there's kind of an issue that it might not hurt Walker in the primary, but if he makes it through, I can guarantee there'll be ads about this left and right.
Okay, and let's wrap it up this way. The Walker presidential campaign spokesperson Ashley Strong said the information comes from a case that has been closed for more than 2 years. It is another example of the politics involved in this process, as people who could not prove things in a court of law are attempting to win in the court of public opinion. Jared, that's kind of a statement that says, oh, it's no coincidence that this was released on the eve of this presidential debate.
Go back the last few months. There were emails released by Abley's office, Chris Abley in Milwaukee County, 2 weeks before the election. There were more emails released, like on the day of the primary, I think it was. Walker was on the primary ballot, obviously, but they're making the case of these guys are basically emptying, like, as a reporter, empty your notebook, right? You do a Sunday piece, get all this stuff Monday through Friday, got nothing else to do with it, make it a Sunday piece.
That's right.
They're basically making a Sunday piece of their investigation. They have all this stuff in the notebook they couldn't use in court. Let's get it out there. That's the Walker perspective of they're just trying to mess with us right now, and this is not fair.
Okay, time for the WisPolitics stock report. Rising.
The governor's legal counsel, Brian Hagedorn. Here's a guy who his job was to vet the judicial cancer of Scott Walker and decided, you know what? I think I'm the best person for an open spot in the appeals court. So he's getting appointed to the Second District Court of Appeals. Good for him.
At the tender age of 37. Go ahead.
Yeah, interesting thing, you don't usually see a legal counsel go from legal counsel to the appeals court. Now, a couple things about that. It's not a circuit court where you're getting rapid fire questions from attorneys and making decisions like that. You're dealing more with legal theory in the appeals court. You have time to take in briefs and listen to oral arguments. So it's not like he'll be a fish out of water, if you will.
Right.
Now, if you're a Democrat, you're going to scream cronyism and all that kind of good stuff. But good for him, just kind of an odd thing. Also not that unusual, though. Gary Sherman, state lawmaker, went from state lawmaker to 4th District Court of Appeals.
Yes.
He didn't live in the
Doyle
4th District at the time.
Right.
Yes. Or his official residence was in the 4th District at the time. Remember Tommy Thompson worked very hard at Lynn Edelman, appointed the federal court to open up that seat. So it's not like this proves that judicial appointments are just political judicial elections anymore. Right. It really does.
And the announcement said that Mr. Hagedorn is a former assistant state attorney general.
Yes.
Mixed.
Wisconsin's power plants, it's a very uncertain time right now. You have these White House rules of carbon emissions that were released. Wisconsin would cut them by 1/3 by 2030. But here comes Scott Walker and Brad Schimmel saying, we're going to sue. So what do you do? It's kind of like that. And then there's an interesting, real fascinating filing this week from We Energy saying, don't approve these 2 power plants because we have so much excess capacity right now, we can fill the need.
Near Beloit, yes.
Go back 15 years ago when I first got here, I was told that Wisconsin was a great environment for business because our power rates were so low. Taxes weren't great, but power is cheap. It's everywhere. We wanted a building boom, infrastructure, power lines, mega power lines, Now it looks like there's kind of like this leftover capacity, and what are we going to do with it? So, and in the end, you and I end up paying for all that capacity.
Well, and on that point, in the press release in which the governor said, I'm asking Schimmel, and I think he's joining 14 other states to block the EPA rule, the governor scored that as costing we ratepayers $13 billion with the B dollars. Falling, sir.
Shirley Abramson, I mean, we all kind of knew her lawsuit was not going to be successful. Even Democratic lawyers I talked to were like, this is a long shot at best. Federal Judge James Peterson, an Obama appointee nonetheless, threw it out. Basically said it's not our place in the federal judicial system to weigh in on this amendment. It was passed, it's good, end of story. Now, she can appeal. There is also an appeal of an earlier Peter decision not to grant her a stay, an original issue she raised. But it's not going to be a defining moment in Shirley's career, but this is definitely a footnote of the first 5 graphs of her obituary will say, Shirley Abramson, the state's first female Supreme Court Chief Justice and longest serving Chief Justice, all these great things, and oh, by the way, she fought like heck to not lose that spot in 2015. It's also, you're 4 years now until her term is done. How's she going to react? She is now, Rogensack is now Chief Justice. Shirley has this kind of role of, okay, now I'm in the minority, I don't have any real authority or power to kind of play with things, but can she be a thorn in Pat Rogensack's side? And oh, by the way, there's really kind of outside context of next year, Justice Crooks is up. We don't think he's going to run. If you replace Crooks with a conservative, now you're talking 5-2. It makes life that much less pleasant for Shirley Abramson in the court going forward.
Wow, fascinating. That's Rewind for this week. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Steve Walters.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.